Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of Clinic Gym Radio. I am your host, Dr. Josh Satterlee, and I'm joined today by the incredible Brad Cox. Brad, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's good to be here.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your time today, Brad. And Brad is the founder, lead janitorial technician, and also CEO of AcuMobility.
Emphasis is on janitorial services.
Yeah, I don't know which one to
really
list first, but
that's the key credential there.
Don't worry. I mean, every time I've owned a clinic or a gym, it's like, by time I'm the lead janitor, and then I also fill these other leadership roles. But
things people do not realize that entrepreneurs always end up doing.
It's very exciting. Yes. So AcuMobility, basically, you guys are a company that, oh man, how would I say it? You have built amazing, incredible tools that help people do their homework after clinical visits, basically.
Yeah, that's one of the key things that we do. And really, we try to combine the education with the products for that specific, purpose.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure everybody has seen, probably the most prolific product that you have is what I would say is the wall mount lacrosse ball. I mean, you call it something different. I don't want to undervalue it, but it looks like a lacrosse ball cut in half with a big wide base on it that allows people to do some trigger point work or get into places where a lacrosse ball would slip. Or I actually had a client put they were using lacrosse ball and they put it through the drywall in my office, which that one.
Oh, I know that happens.
Yeah.
That's the worst. Somebody tried to use a spiky ball once on the drywall, just destroys it.
Yeah. So. Did I do a good job explaining what you guys, what your product line is? Why don't you explain it a little bit for those people who might not be that familiar with you?
Sure. So the very first product we came up with was the AcuMobility ball. That's what we call it, even though it's not a ball.
Right.
And it was the first flat-based trigger point ball. And we developed that 6 years ago. Okay. We were working on some techniques, doing some, trying to teach some homework for clients that involved pin and stretch, active range of motion sort of technique. And we were using a lacrosse ball, and the lacrosse ball kept rolling away. And my wife, Dr. Sonia Pasquali, was like, man, if we could make something that just stayed right in place so that it never left the trigger point, we could really open up and do so much more direct and controlled work on, all these spots that we're trying to work. And so she had that idea, and it grew from there. And we had a patient who was one of the heads at Rhode Island School of Design. He helped prototype it. We had other patients who put us in touch with engineers, and literally we evolved to become a product company, but it all came out of the education. We were just looking for a better tool to do what we were teaching people to do. And what was shocking is we went on to buy one and it didn't exist. And so literally nobody had ever made a flat baseball. And so we own the utility patents on that entire concept. So we own the idea of a flat-based trigger point ball.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some email somewhere, some guys making lacrosse balls, and he's going, why are these crazy people asking for a flat? But have you ever played with a ball, you idiots? Like, this is a ball.
You can't use that for lacrosse.
Yeah.
It's funny because we get people reaching out to do lacrosse distribution for us all the time. We're like, no, it's you're barking at the wrong tree.
Yeah.
This is not a lacrosse ball.
Yeah.
So that was the first
product. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that was the first product, and we never really planned initially to become a product company. Mm-hmm. We were really an education company, and we were teaching seminars and doing all this work in the clinic and outside. And with the AcuMobility ball, we started realizing, well, there's so many other things we could innovate on. And that's really what we've tried to do. And so then we built something called the Eclipse roller, which is really a leg roller. It wraps around the tissue to do targeted trigger point work. And then Sonia had the idea for the back roller, which is ultra tall, 11 and a half inches tall, wide diameter, and it's got a groove for the spine in the middle of it, so that the bumps hit just the paraspinal muscles on either side. So there's no direct pressure on the spine. So when you roll on it, you're getting work done on the muscles either side. Mm-hmm. And that's, besides the balls, that is our other most popular product, because there's so much you can do with it. And we got a ton of new products coming out, and it just kind of just rolled from there. We just keep trying to innovate, and we have zero interest in making something that somebody else has already done. right? So we don't want to iterate. We want to just like literally create new categories. All with the idea though of just making better tools that we can use to teach individuals how to do self-care stuff and help clinicians teach their patients how to do better home care work. And that was really where the company came from. And we're just going to keep going and see what else we can innovate on and build.
I'm going to guess that most of your R&D sessions end with, why hasn't somebody done this already? Like
most
the clinicians are begging for it. They've all hacked something together. I mean, like I saw your ball and I just pictured it in my mind. I'm like, many times I've thought about holding a lacrosse ball in a vise and cutting it in half with a hacksaw. Like I've thought about that to make it more stable. But what's even better about your product is the base is even wider than that. It's high enough that it gets some tissue penetration.
Right.
If you're asking somebody to kind of use it on their pec, for example, like you're already in a concavity, right? And then also, exactly. I don't know if you guys refine this multiple times, but the tackiness of it just doesn't slip. I mean, you can put it on glass for God's sakes, and I think it's not going to slip off. It's going to stay stuck where it is to help you work on that, which is great when people are working, say they're rhomboids or something, and they're blind to it, their back's rounded. It's a nightmare scenario to get something to ever stay there.
That was actually one of the hardest. It's shockingly difficult to make that ball. It is a 3-piece mold. It's this massive tool, and we build them up in Maine. So it's made in the US, and getting the tackiness was really one of the key things that we tried to do. That we went through so many different materials, rubber, it galvanizes and then gets too slippery, silicone, and we landed on medical grade, non-toxic TPE material. And so it has these unique properties where you can clean it with Clorox and you can, bleach it and it never breaks, and yet it's recyclable, and yet it's non-toxic and no allergies. Like it's a truly unique material.
I have one that I think is 5 years old, and out here I'm in Las Vegas. Anything rubber will break down after time. It just the
heat and the sun,
so close to zero. It's hot all the time. Like bands, like our bands will oftentimes wear out from environmental issues
totally
faster than they will from people using them, and they all turn white within a week because they start oxidizing because of the low humidity and whatnot. I have an AcuMobility ball that I think is older than one of my kids, and it's still going strong. Like, except for the little bit of wear that you can see, or a little bit of just some, I don't know, you can just see that it's not a brand new ball. Like I would give it to a patient tomorrow. It's perfect.
We are so stoked about that material. And so we got the 2 levels, the softer one and the harder one, but it's the same material. It's got unique properties. And it was a big part of what we searched for. We tried a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to that. Like when you guys were searching. So there you are teaching some classes, looking at your wife, looking at your friends and saying, I wish there's gotta be a mobility ball that stays stuck on a wall. There has to be one out there, right? I mean, I'm going to guess this all started with an intense Google search going, what the hell? This doesn't exist?
Like literally, yeah. And then immediately from that, we didn't set out with the idea of like, okay, let's go make a product to market. It was more just following curiosity. Okay. We were talking to one of our patients who first, and we wanted him for the clinic. We were like, can we just make something that we can use? That was the first thing we tried to do, and then from literally we were hand pouring molds with this guy named Doug Borkman, who's a friend of ours. He was a patient, and he would take balls and put them in there. And we had all these prototypes, different sizes, all this stuff. And we were using them in the clinic. And we just kept iterating and iterating. And, Sonia would say, okay, now we need a flexion point here, or we need this attribute, or a little wider, right? Until it got down to the final height and shape. And at that point, it was interesting. We were actually working with
I'll sell you one of these. They're only like $126 a piece. Super easy.
Exactly. Right? Like, each one of them, right? Like when you realize all the costs that go into making, I mean, people have no idea. There's a reason people don't start product companies, right? Like it is incredibly difficult, incredibly costly, time consuming to do the R&D, to build the tools, to make the products before you ever actually put one out there. And so you end up just taking on all of this risk because you have to believe in what you're doing. And we were working with this shoe company. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They're called Topo Athletic. And the founder of Topo was the guy who created the Vibram 5 Fingers. and his name is Tony Post, and they were in Boston, and they had hired us to make a running program for them. And so we were going to put this assessment and corrective program that had all these mobility drills in it. And it just so happened to be that we were designing this program for them at the same time that we were also working on this ball and this product. And so the confluence of those two things is what really made us think, okay, let's push this forward and let's include it in the program. And so that program launch was, runners world, all this stuff, and the ball was in there. And that was kind of like what then made us feel confident to jump to, all right, let's try to do this. And
did they
what
help
else can
you
we
with
make?
the working of, I mean, they kind of understood foam and rubber and molds, right? I mean, had you been hired by a company that did like, that they were like, hey, we sell barbells, it might not have worked.
Well, they actually had no part in the development process. They took a huge leap on us because we said, listen, we're going to put this in the video. It doesn't exist yet. It's not going to be on the market yet, but we're going to do this because it makes all of our exercises better. And they just believed in us that somehow we were going to solve these problems, get this product to market. Looking back, I'm like, wow, that was an amazing leap of faith. Now realizing how hard it was to do. In the beginning, you're kind of naive. You're like, oh, of course we can do this. And now you go, oh my God, like it's just constant obstacles, like every day. And so they had the faith. They're like, okay, well, we believe in these guys. They're going to figure this out. And they let us put it in all the videos. And then we were like, oh, all right, so this is in all the videos. Now we really have to make this thing.
Yes.
But they didn't help us at all with that part.
Of building the airplane while in flight, right? Like,
literally, yes. And
one of these exists, and we're going to make it sound like 1,000 of these exist, and then you could buy them today. Like,
I mean, that is pretty much where this began with. And then we figured it out. But we didn't use them at all for that, right? They were just supportive.
That's interesting.
And encouraging. And we're still good friends with them, and we work with them on other things. But
so you throw in the videos, and now you're basically pot committed to actually making this thing because you're going to get hits like, hey, where do I buy one, right? And then how do you go from that to, essentially you guys are the non-drug version of Breaking Bad, right? You're mixing chemicals in your kitchen, essentially trying to produce these mobility.
Pouring like literally
telling your kid, cups. Hey, listen, I don't know how this is going to go. Go into the other room real quick, just
step aside. That's literally pretty much how it works. In the office bathroom, pouring chemicals and working this up.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, we totally believe in holistic health here because we're an acupuncture clinic.
Don't breathe
any of these chemicals.
Exactly, right? Because that was before we figured out what TPE was, and God knows what these molds were actually made out of at that like prototype phase. But they smelled really bad. Let's put it that way. It was not good. Yeah. I got a little lightheaded working on it.
That's awesome.
And so Sonia and I were working on those with the help of one of our patients who is a product guy and designer, and then we got like a close enough prototype that it worked, and that's what we used in the videos. And then we were looking for an engineering firm, and like, how do you do this? How do you bring that to the next level? Which is not easy to do, because no large company is going to take your phone call to make something if you have no track record.
And let's just put this in perspective for people, because I've had some friends that do some manufacturing. Like in the world of manufacturing, to have a small run of something oftentimes could be 200,000 of them. Like exactly. A lot of companies are like, we're not even going to do it until you had 2 million, a run of 2 million of them,
They don't want to talk to you unless you can guarantee volume.
Right.
And that's the challenge if you're a small guy starting up, is that
the
to
first
cross
time you make 200,000 of them, they cost you $2 to $5 a piece, where at some point they'll be 25 cents. But early on, the molding, setup.
God, I wish these would be 25 cents. Yeah. Making them in the US is both a
blessing and a curse, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But no matter how cheap they are now, I'm going to guess your first run of them was 5-10 times more per unit. Like, because
not only that, but you have to pay for and build the physical tools to make them. Right. And so we own the tools, these massive stainless steel molds that were laser cut and had all these intricacies and injection, for releases, like all this stuff, right? Like this huge project. And you have to make one of those to even make the first real one. Right. And so you're doing it off of your prototype and you're trying to get there. And so the first one of those, you make a couple cavities, but you need to make more and more to keep up with scale. And like, it's this constant investment and iteration to grow. And it never stops. And that's the thing people don't realize, is that like every time you grow, it's just more challenges, more investments, more scale, more like it doesn't actually get easier. It just gets bigger and newer problems.
Have you read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight?
I love Shoe Dog. That's actually one of the, if nobody knows what you're talking about, right? But Phil Knight's story of Nike growing and literally like the reinvestment process was one of the best examples that people have no idea when they think of entrepreneurs and they see successful companies, or they see people who like made it overnight or any of that stuff. They have no idea what the reality of building that is.
Yeah.
He did a great job displaying that.
Yeah. For those listening, there's a part where Phil Knight talks about Nike had doubled in growth every year for something like 8 years. And so you'd think, oh man, like if a clinic had doubled every year for 10 years, like you'd be, doing backflips. His bank calls him into the office and says, hey, we think you're committing fraud. So we've reported you to the FBI and we're no longer going to, have you as clients. And it's like, what? And they're like, yeah, your outgo of cash is just too big. And he's like, we're doubling in size. I have to order shoes before I can sell them, and then the other funny part was when I think he said like Nike was doing $25 million a year in revenue. And he flies his new sales guy to the East Coast. They land and he swipes the company credit card and gets declined.
And he gets declined. Yeah. You're always, if you're growing, you're always at the edge of sanity. You're always at the edge of the frontier. And that's kind of what happened to us. This is year 6, and we have literally doubled or 2 to 3x every year. And then we're R&Ding and we're investing in new products, and we only make top quality stuff. So our stuff costs more to R&D and make, because we want it to be back rollers rated to 1,000 pounds, right? Nothing's rated to 1,000 pounds of pressure, right? Like that's overkill, because we're like, this thing's never going to break, And so people just don't realize what that process looks like. And it's something I'm interested in explaining to people, because I think a lot of people have ideas. They want to make something. They want to do something, and it's like the process behind that is both incredibly fascinating, because you realize that you can build things, but it's also incredibly challenging. And those challenges don't get easier. They just get bigger. Yeah.
And you just get more used to more zeros at the end of every check request, right? Like
that's the only difference, right?
Just send us another 50 grand and we'll attempt to maybe get started. Okay. What happens after that? Well, then you send us another 40 grand and we actually get started, but we can't ship anything to you.
Right. And then like a year and a half later, right, after doing that, like some of our products that we're going to launch the next year, we've been working on for at least 2 years, building tools, testing stuff, investing into, all while trying to grow the existing product lines. And that is just like, it's a fascinating, unique, and stressful process, because growth is hard.
Yeah. In every sense, I think growth is hard, right?
In every sense. Yeah.
So going back to that first initial, you guys kind of devised this. I kind of cut you off and we took a little jag, but you're pouring chemicals in the office. You're getting lightheaded, and which is probably beneficial for you to decide to move forward. Like you shouldn't have been in
because you're a little high
state of mind. Exactly. Oh, this is gonna work, babe. We're totally
this is great.
Double the orders. So how did you get to the point where you could actually produce these in a way that you had products to take out to stores or give to trainers or whoever your early network was? I mean, you needed to have quite a few of these to just go down and get, different people interested in them, right? Or host these classes and give them to participants. How did you get to that level of product?
Well, and this is where I would say that we owe an enormous blessing to our patients and our community, because we were deep in the strength and conditioning community. So we knew all these people, who were top coaches and, had reputations and believed in us. So when we said we're going to do this, they helped vouch for us to the world. They put it out there like, these guys are legit. Their education is legit. Look at their product. And that kind of helped us cross that divide of, unknown, just operating in our clinic, right, in our local communities, treating people, working on movement problems, to then being able to cross that event horizon and get bigger fast enough that you kind of like can get to the scale you need. It's really because of those connections and those relationships. And so we made the balls in Maine, and that allowed us to be locally sourced, which was incredibly useful in terms of the initial runs were driving up there back and forth, right? Like I'll pick up a box of them, right? Like, and so that process, and truthfully, the manufacturer up in Maine, they're great people too, down to earth, just down to earth Americans who just like believe in entrepreneurship. And so they took a winger on us as well. And we look back and we owe a debt of gratitude to everybody who took a chance on us, who was like, we don't know why, but we think these people are going to figure this out and make this. And
you understand that ball won't bounce, right?
Exactly. Right. And that was the key, but it really all came from the education is why we took the initiative to do this, because it was no different than what we'd already been doing. The only difference now was that we had a product that happened to go with it, right? We were already teaching seminars. We were already doing deadlift clinics and running workshops and working with the shoe company, right? And working with clinicians and trying to teach people how to assess and correct. And then we use the word unify, right? Which is essentially tie together movement patterns. And that's really was the core of what we were doing. That was the core of why we created the product. And because of that education, which differentiated us from all of their product companies on the market who just made foam rollers or made things like that, we could get out there and we could say, not only is this a really cool tool, but here's how to use it, right? Yeah. Here's why to use it. Yeah. And so we were able to then connect with and build with, bigger coaches who are like, this serves a need, this serves a role in my clinic. Right. And that's where we started. We didn't go to retailers. We didn't go to shops, right? We built a network through clinicians to try to teach them stuff. And it all came back from education. And that was really the driving force.
It's funny. You can see multiple companies that kind of have done that up in your area, Perform Better. I'm sure you're familiar with them. They, are a product company and they realize, hey, let's offer education and show people how to use these products and why to use these products
backwards.
And they're going to buy it a lot. I mean, you look at Rock Tapes.
Oh, actually.
How many tape providers are there on earth? Like, I don't know, there's got to be 24 of them, but Rock Tape really went after these seminars and education and they have that incredible brand loyalty because you can use any sort of tape, but people love their product because they love their education. They feel like, hey, I get it. I'm a part of this. And then they've launched a bunch of products from there. That'd be the only thing, the only advantage they have over you is theirs is a consumable. Like we got to find a way for this AcuMobility ball to break down after 3 months and people keep buying them,
Right. Dude, like it lasts forever. Like
I wrote a book durable. And the worst thing you ever hear as an author is like, I loved your book. I gave it to my friend. It's like, no, keep yours, buy them one. Don't load it up.
Yeah. But to your point, like that was why we were able to do that. Like, so in the first year, we actually partnered with Graston Technique, for example. We became their official partner. So we taught them, and they included in their level 2 course, our education, right? That's awesome. How to assess and correct stuff. And then they put the ball in there, right? We partnered with Kabuki Strength, we partnered with people, all education driven for how to solve unique problems versus just trying to sell a ball, right? Yeah. And that was the key difference. Yeah. And that's been the differentiator. Is that because that's what we actually are about.
Yeah. So just speaking to that AcuMobility ball, the flagship product, what was the first time you got some feedback from a user or a coach or somebody that was outside of Brad's little circle of 1 degree of separation, that you're like, somebody reaches out to you and says, hey, I love this thing, how can I get more? Do you remember that first interaction where they didn't deal directly with you guys and realized it was an incredible product?
I'll tell you, God, there's some good early stories related to that. And it all happened very quickly.
In 20 years, this is going to be the documentary, and they'll use parts of, parts of my interview as the early days to kind of, So.
Which is crazy because you forget some of the stuff, right? Like, even though it wasn't that long ago, but like when we launched,
this is what we should do. Pull out your credit card statement from the early days and let's go through when it peaked.
No, like literally that's what you did. That's what we did.
So you maxed it out on May 6th and then again on May 9th. So let's talk about those two things.
Right. Like what happened there, right?
Exactly.
But no, what happened was So one of our patients, a guy named Jeff Bromhall, was a power lifter. We worked with a lot of power lifters. He'd gone to this seminar with a guy named Chris Duffin from Kabuki Strength, right? And he told Chris, he said, you got to talk to these guys at AcuMobility. They got this really cool product. They got this great thing. We had just launched the company, literally just launched the company.
When was this? Give me a year.
This was February of 2015, 2016.
Okay.
Either 2015 or 2016. And we went to the Arnold Sports Festival, right?
Okay.
And that was our very first event we ever did, right? It was the Arnold Sports Festival. And we sponsored USA Powerlifting, right? So we were one of the key sponsors. And we were like, we're going to make a splash. We're going to show up in this little booth, screamed for 3 days straight because it was insane. And Chris came over, Duffin came over, and at the very end, and our patient, said, hey, you guys got to talk, right? And we just missed each other the whole time. Then within an hour, we realized that we were kindred spirits, and we really liked what each other was talking about. They just launched Kabuki, and we left, and we're like, we got to stay in touch. And I flew out to Portland, I don't know, a month later, and we hung out for a few days, and we filmed, and we did all this collaborative stuff together. And then Chris believed in what we were doing. We believed in what he was doing. Chris told everybody and their mother, right? Like about us too. And that's when we started having some of these, connections and broader experiences. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. And that's why I say it's really because of the patients and because of the vouching for the education that we were doing, that we were able to say, hey, this is real. This is legit. This isn't just some product, right? These guys are doing the education. And that's what we connected with everybody about. It actually wasn't about the ball. It was never about the product. Every time we went somewhere, what we did with them is we did our assess, correct, unify stuff. We did breakouts. Like Chris and I were at Cressy's, and we were breaking out his staff, and we're fixing their knee problems. And we're like, and that was always the driver, is that how do you incorporate this into your clinic? How do you incorporate it into your gym? How do you incorporate it if you're at home? That message resonated with people. And we tried to make it as simple as possible, showing that this is one piece, this is one tool, this is one thing, right? Here's how you can work it into being the most efficient. Here's how you can do this. And so that kind of spiraled. But yet again, it was all because people resonated with the message of the education. And then we, like within months, you kind of just keep building relationships. And the next thing you know, every single MLB team is calling us, all the NFL teams are calling. And that's when you get those crazy kind of weird experiences where you're like, I'm sorry, what, the Astros want to start? And like, you just have launched. And those were cool to experience. But looking back, the most fun part was connecting with people on the education, right? Like that was the most exciting part, is that like you get to show up and we do a seminar, or we're working with like a clinician, or we're working with Graston, or we're working with somebody, and we're showing like, hey, here's how you can incorporate active mobilization into the clinic setting. Here's how you can incorporate this. And then the ball just happened to be the very best tool to do that. But that's backwards from, I have a product to sell, let me go sell the product. That wasn't how we approached it, right? Mm-hmm. We approached it with, we got this education to share with people. We want to help people understand how to assess, how to fix, how to incorporate like active mobilization work in the most efficient way possible for different kinds of problems. Let's hit that, and let's partner with educators on that. And then the messaging takes care of itself, because then you go, oh, and guess what? Like this ball is literally designed to solve this. And then this roller is literally designed to be better at it than this. And that was the process. And that's still what we're doing today. We're going to launch online cert courses and or big online programs to cover different topics. We're going to launch a direct kind of, how do you do mobility work at home online courses? Like we've got a lot coming out on that. Clearly COVID made it harder to do in-person stuff, but like that was and continues to be the core of the company. Is not products. We happen to be a product company. We are really an education company that has products.
You're an education company that makes specific products to support the education.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that is different. Like you pointed out Rock Tape, right? They're one of the other very few examples of that, and that has been a key differentiator. There's 1,000 foam rollers out there. There's a ton of mobility products, like all that stuff. The coupling of that with the education, with high quality stuff, is what has made us unique and differentiated.
So let me ask you this, Brad, for my listeners, so for everybody listening, Brad is a clinician as well. before he was Mr. Big Time in the manufacturing space. He was, an acupuncturist. Your wife's a chiropractor and acupuncturist who obviously went to the what's termed the Harvard of chiropractic colleges, because she was in the same class I was at Southern California University of Health Sciences.
And she's the real brains here. So let's be clear.
Yeah, she was in our class too. Like, I think if you divided her GPA by 2 and then subtracted another 0.7, you'd get to my GPA. So she's always been a leader.
Wicked smart.
Anyways, so you guys are, you hands-on clinician teaching workshops and doing all that stuff early on before the products ever came out. If you were advising somebody in their local market to they're like, hey, I want to increase my business. I want to increase my clinic, right? And from all that you've learned in these other businesses, if you could go back and advise that person how to build up their clinic, what would you tell them from all the lessons you've learned? Because you've learned these lessons also with high stakes, right? Like, you had to invest in product or invest in stuff, invest in travel. Whereas in our local clinics, sometimes we get a little, the stakes aren't that big because people just happen to walk through the door.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you mean, because there's 2 different directions I can go with this, right? Mm-hmm. There's the specific advice based off of like how to build a robust clinic. And then there's how do you differentiate yourself?
What I'm utilizing. I would love to pursue either one that you think is important, because I'm hearing, number one, build a network, and I don't want to say work the network, but work the network in the sense of approach them with your education, show them how you can, like what you did with Duffin is, hey, I can help you improve your performance. Right. And if it benefits me, that's great. But rather than, hey, I want to benefit from you.
That is a great way of putting it, right? And I think it's something that gets lost with a lot of the like quote unquote marketing talk, right? Like clinicians think they have to market in a specific way. And what we found, like we never marketed once to build the sports medicine clinic, like literally not once. We just over-delivered value. And every time, if you over-deliver value and you have a persistent drive and desire to solve unique problems, and you're willing to teach your patients and then teach essentially the person who referred your patient, the value you're adding to them is so immense that the ease for them to refer to you becomes very they look better by referring to you, right? Because you're adding value to them. We would show up to gyms in the early days, right? And we would teach stuff. We would help them solve problems.
Would you charge for that early stuff, or were you doing
no? Not at all, right? And that was the thing. And even our how we approached initial intakes, right? We would spend 2 hours breaking out everything a person did, right? Because we were always focused a lot on movement and solving movement issues, right? And so we already had a unique niche, and applying acupuncture and all these other tools, like we didn't fit in a box, and that was helpful because it wasn't just one thing. We didn't approach it like any one group would approach it. We only cared about
we didn't approach it like any sane person would approach it.
So, exactly, right? And what we wanted to do is we just wanted to find always the best way to help the patient and or help the gym and or help the clinician, whoever was referring, solve that problem. And when we deliver on that, and if you deliver on that, you naturally build a goodwill with people, because it's not about you then, right? And it's not about you asking something of them. And in the nature of that, your relationships deepen and your ability to be an authority grows. And then your ability to leverage that expands. And that's, I think, one of the key things that people miss is that you have to build that. You have to build that trust. You have to build that authority. You have to build all of those things through giving, right? Like through giving of effort, time, energy, and really trying to add a lot of value to people. And if you do that, then your value increases, right? And then your ability to, get more choosy about who comes to the clinic or be able to do what we do or something like that, right? Which is just a whole other branch off, of that increases. And yet again, that goes back to education, right? Like we always saw ourselves not as the person who's fixing your problem, but the person who's there to teach you how to fix, how to work, how to improve your own stuff. And really, AcuMobility is just an extension of that, right? Now we do it on a massive scale, right? Instead of on a one-on-one scale, we try to still do that thing. But if you're a clinician And you can do that for your patient. And then any tools you can use to incorporate in that allows you to differentiate yourself in the community, that makes you an expert who is both giving, right, effective, and also seen as somebody who is a resource, immediately changes the game, right? For your ability to create long-term successful partnerships and relationships that over time have compounded interest. But it all goes back to teaching. Like literally every appointment, we saw it as an opportunity to teach somebody something. Your intake was an opportunity to teach you something. Sure, we do all the orthopedic tests, we break it all out, but we use that only as a means to show you how to work and improve your own problems, involve you in the process, involve the coach in the process, right? And do it in a non-threatening way. We're never critical of other people. We didn't never said like, oh, that's bullshit. Oh, don't do that. It's like, no. All right, so that strength and conditioning coach, he's trying to do this thing. He's getting stuck here. How can we help them get to where they need to go? Make them look better, make their patients happier, make their clients happier. And then how do we like empower them to be doing that for themselves? Because here's the thing, everybody fears that, oh, if you teach your patients, well, how to care for themselves to do so, they don't need you. They don't need to come back. Well, that was half of our pitch. That was half of what we said. It was like, literally, I'm here to facilitate your learning to make you better, right? And guess what happens though? Well, when you empower people, not only do they want to come back, but you become the resource for any new problem that comes up versus a transactional sort of relationship where you're there just to adjust them, just to scrape something, like whatever it is. That's not a model that like you can build long-term trust with. And so that was the one piece of advice. And with that comes what we do now with clinicians. And what we were doing pre-COVID is teaching courses all around the country for this, which is teaching them how do you add in education components to your intakes? How do you add it in as homework? That's a lot of what we do with like the products. That's a lot of what we do with the education is we teach clinicians, hey, okay, you've got this client. Here's the work you know you're going to do on them. Well, here's this other layer you can add. And guess what? By adding that layer, you are now an expert and a resource for them in a much bigger way. And those tools you need to keep growing as a clinician, right? Or as a gym owner, or as whatever it is that you're doing. And if you can grow that component, right, you can get better about learning how to teach them how to quickly assess and spot fix stuff. Here's how to use, I don't know, the AcuMobility balls, right? At home for homework, to care for the thing I just did on the table. Here's how to know whether you have this problem, right? Like every step that you can interject is helpful in building your authority.
I think you're covering a huge point here with the education. If I were a young clinician today and I was trying to build up my practice, I think the first thing I would do would be to put together a fixing movement course that's maybe 1 to 2 hours long for local coaches. So let's just say CrossFit style gyms, and you just talk about fixing the squat. For example, you and I know that dorsiflexion is a huge component of that for the most part gets overlooked completely in the coaching realm, but in the clinician realm gets addressed all the time. I would just bridge that gap and I would just do a 1 hour, maybe 2 hour thing about when to fix it. And then I would say like, here's what you can do. Use this tool, use this thing. And then I would just draw a clear line and say, if these 3 options don't work, that's a good time to bring me into the mix, but try all this. I'm telling you, like all this stuff that you'll blow your clients away. They'll love you. They'll be impressed by you. Try and build them up as much as possible and just make a clear line about here's where you recruit me. And because a lot of their reason that they're not referring, I'll just tell you from my experience, I don't know if you ran into this too, Brad, is they don't know when to call you in.
100%.
And they're like, I don't know. I don't want to fill it. I don't want to bother you. And you're like, no, for this type of person, bother me.
I think that is literally the best advice. I agree with you. And that is actually what we did, right? We did 2-hour squat clinics in which we assessed lower leg rotation and ankle stuff and we fixed it. Like you just do that stuff, add value, be seen as an expert. And in that 2 hours, I mean, that person got so much out of that. Well, what do you think is going to happen when they hurt their elbow? They're going to call you, right? Because they're like, well, who's the guy who helped me the most with that? And that's where you cannot underinvest in that. You cannot underinvest in your development and your ability to communicate that in a way that is non-salesy, that is not about you, that is not about trying to get somebody in the door, but that is about adding value to them. And that's literally, I mean, that's one of our biggest goals now, like as a company, is how do we give clinicians those tools to add that education component, right? Because that's a lot of like what it is we're doing, right? Is that component, that thing you can do, you can show up to that place and have a squat hour seminar, right?
Yeah.
And show, here's how you assess this. Here's how you work this. You can bring a bucket of AcuMobility balls and you can have them all do that work. And guess what? You didn't treat any of those people, but half of them walked away immediately with improved squat form, right? And the other half, like if they had something going on, immediately see you as like the guy to call. And either way, you're now part of that community, which means when stuff comes up, they're going to think of you. You do that over time, right? Over years, you cannot help but be successful because it's not about you. You're adding value and you're really helping people. Yeah. And I mean, that's what we did for the clinic and that's what we're doing now.
Yeah. Hey, I want to do a little quick live read from our sponsor because I think it fits very well here. This podcast is sponsored by Clinic Gym Connect, which is a software that helps you connect to your patients, your referral sources, to your clients in the gym. And Brad and I just talked about the importance of education. If you were to educate your local coaches and then have a follow-up campaign where you maybe every week send them tips about fixing squats, fixing overhead presses, fixing all those things, and empower them to be a whole lot better of coaches and work with their clients at a higher level, they'll be appreciative. But it's super important to stay in communication with those people. So sending them those messages and having a path for them to communicate back to you, to ask questions, to send pictures, to send messages, is one of the components of Clinic Gym Connect. So if you're interested in doing that, check out clinicgymconnect.com, or there's a link on the Clinic Gym Hybrid homepage. Clinicgymconnect.com allows you to do that through the method that your clients are already communicating, which is text messaging. It allows you, everybody in your clinic, to communicate through one single number, no matter who in the clinic that person is trying to reach. We can assign those conversations, and you can create campaigns. Say you want to have a campaign just for local coaches about the squat clinic. You could have a campaign for patients who come from those gyms. You can have all sorts of campaigns that communicate clearly with them and help them hit that higher level like Brad's talking about. So check out clinicgymconnect.com. All right, Brad. Well, thanks, because this is, I think it's everything. You're confirming everything I believe in. Education is huge. And the products have come out of the education piece, and getting out to your local community, building that network is huge. That's the other thing I would do as a young clinician. Well, two other things piggybacking on what you just said. I would assemble a list of local coaches, and I would never stop communicating with them in a very valuable way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
add
then
value to them.
Yeah. The second thing I would do for any clinicians listening out there, if you want to put together education, I would love to get your opinion on this, Brad, but I would say, try and first develop one amazing course. So let's say you're fixing the squat. Don't try and fix the squat, and the next week you fix the overhead press, and the next week you fix the horizontal row. Just go for one of those and make it mind-blowing to your coaches. Here's how I would start it. I would go to the coaches and say, hey, what is it that keeps people from coming back? Or what's the number one complaint you hear? And whatever they say, oh, people can't get into their overhead squat, or people can't do this, or they have pain with pull-ups, or I can't do this. Cool. So for me, I love working with golfers. And the number one thing we heard was from female golfers who said, I just can't hit the ball far enough. We did a workshop, we called it the Driving Women's Workshop, all about women hitting the ball further. It was super basic stuff. They loved it. We couldn't get enough of them. Our classes were totally packed. They loved it. They told their friends. We became the place to help you with golf fitness to hit the ball further. Female country club members were by far our number one clients. If you look at the average value per one of those that walks in, they scheduled super easily. They never rescheduled. They never missed. They never had trouble paying. They would buy everything we offered. They were easy to work on, like some old crusty guy that's whose blood is 28% high level Scotch is a little bit tougher to get to recover.
It's a little harder.
Yeah. These women took care of themselves. They were in great, they're absolute perfect patients. And it started with that conversation of what's the number one thing you deal with? And that's what we thought we could fix. So along that, would you go for multiple courses, or would you start and knock out one of them?
we did almost exactly what you just said, right? And we applied it to the strength community. Like literally, that was the exact same thing. It's funny because I originally did TPI like 11 years ago. That was like the introduction to FMS. Is I did all levels of TPI. And I thought golf was going to be a big thing, but in our area there just wasn't that much of it, right? And so it turned out, we built these inroads with the strength crowd. But that's exactly what we did. We literally came up with and it was actually about squat, right? And we came in and we did that one. We also developed another one just because we had a different community that was a running based one, right? So we did have two totally different kinds of things that we emphasized, but both had the same key features. And it was something that's actionable, something that adds both a clarity for a problem somebody might be having and an immediate thing they can do about that thing, right? That has an impact on them. So they can leave going, I know more and I've already improved something, right? They won't have improved everything, of course, but you added value through teaching them more, right? Which is where the assessment, there's got to be some sort of assessment component to that, right? Assessing the underlying biomechanics, right? It's the first part of what we teach, right? And some sort of corrective technique. We always lean towards the active mobilization, using the balls, right? To create an immediate change and something that ties that together. That's the unification part so that you've bridged the whole thing. Hey, here's the end goal. You wanted to squat deeper, whatever it is, right? You rotate better in your golf swing. Here's an assessment to show where it is that you're king to where what's not working efficiently. Here's an action you can do, in this case, active mobilization. Here's a way to tie it back together. And boom, at the end of that hour, look at what you can do now. And make it that simple, right? And solve a problem. Because there's 1,000 problems you could solve, right? To your point, you don't need to solve 1,000 problems, right? Like you just need to solve one really well that is immediate transference to them. And that's kind of like the magic sauce. And that's what we're trying to give people the tools to do is, okay, how do you do those quick assessments? And how do you do those corrections? And how do you put it back together quickly, right? Don't waste a lot of time. Don't roll everything. Don't do all this like wasted stuff. Targeted work. If you can do that, man, you blow people's minds and they're happy to come.
I hope everybody listening heard what Brad said and the energy around the assessments. You have to include an assessment because the secret to that is if you're the person teaching, if you can get them to buy off on the idea of an assessment, typically what that does is it isolates one problem. And most of us have the clinical knowledge to easily knock that problem out. So let's just say it's, let me think of a good one, thoracic spine rotation, right? Like
that's a great one.
Yeah. If you can get them to buy off on, oh, wow, that's isolated and I can see that it's limited and then you fix it, they're not going to check their entire rotation. They're going to check that assessment, which you just improved. And so it is like a trick for the person teaching because you're not saying you can fix everything, but you're saying, hey, I think I got a trick for this one. And they know how to retest it. And so then they go home and tell their husband, wife, or whatever, like, oh yeah, I couldn't turn to the right. And then the guy like did something funky. And now look, I can turn all the way right. They have to buy off on the assessment. And it also is reassuring to what you're teaching. And it makes you look like more of an expert when you show them how to analyze it, you fix it, and then they reanalyze it afterwards. So,
because that's all they'll remember. That's it, right? Yeah. You'll know all this other stuff and you'll be like, they'll take away like two things, right? And that's the key one we found people take away. And it's fascinating because, and then later, if they do come to the clinic, well, then you can get into the depth and solve all these other problems one by one, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the other thing we try to emphasize all the time is that there's an order of priority to what to work on, right? And this gets lost a lot, is that people, they see 1,000 problems and they're like, well, let's work on 1,000 things. It's overwhelming to the client. It's ineffective, And so that's a lot of where the assessments come back in, is that like, we're trying to identify those one or two key starting places. That's it. That's the whole objective. That's even what we do in the clinic. You work those, you fix those. Guess what? 10 other things clean themselves up. If they don't, well, then you go to the next one. And in your seminar or whatever it is you're teaching, if you can nail just one thing for the person, it's a success.
Yeah, I mean, think about like if you tell me, hey, my car's not running well, and you go to the mechanic, probably they could replace your tires and things would improve a little bit. Probably they could replace your brakes. Probably they could do an alignment. Probably they could replace your spark plugs, your distributor. They could clean, all these things. Yeah, you could improve everything for $10,000, or we could go through a process and find the one thing that is making your car run the poorest, fix that, and then have you hop in and you go, oh my God, I couldn't accelerate to 60 miles an hour. Now I can. You guys are amazing. And it's like,
I changed that air filter, and now
exactly.
the one thing.
The one thing.
And I think you were asking new clinicians, right?
Yeah.
New clinicians are the ones who get the most caught in complexity because they've learned so much cool stuff, right? And they're super stoked and passionate about getting it out there. So they want to do everything. They make super complicated training programs. They make super complicated treatment approaches, or they don't, or there's other models clearly where people aren't that, right? But that's what I see a lot in the simplicity side, which is the other big part of our messaging, is the hardest part for them, right? What is those one or two key things? And that's a lot of the clarity we try to bring, like when we teach clinicians, when we teach courses or blogs or something about that, is that like, okay, super complex world, lots of ways to approach problems. Lots of them work, right? You can fix a problem 20 different ways and they're all valid. Some are going to be more efficient and faster, but you need to be able to communicate and execute that with a simplicity to it, because otherwise you're going to overwhelm your client. You're going to get overwhelmed. And then you're also not going to know what worked. And this is the hard part. You do too much stuff all at once. You don't know what worked. Whereas if I use 2 balls and I do the vice technique to the lower leg and I immediately change tibial rotation, you can squat better. Guess what? I know what the thing was that worked and you do too. And then you're going to be willing to go do that homework and you're going to be willing to go repeat that because you're like, oh my God, to your point, I went to this thing. I couldn't do this. Now I can. Awesome. I'm going to do that in my warm up. Boom. Right.
And the next time I have an issue, I'm definitely going to call that guy Brad, because the way he fixed this lower leg thing, and I bet he can totally help with the shoulder pain that I'm experiencing a year later.
Exactly. And that's literally what it is sometimes. A year later, right? That person has, their neck hurts or whatever it is. And you're like, okay.
Yeah. It's so funny, like the education piece. I mean, like, I grew up Catholic and the idea to say like, don't let anybody know that at the church they're using the Bible, because then they'll never come back, is like the most ridiculous thing ever. You educate them about the Bible, all the people do is go, well, I'm going to dive into that myself. And also when I do, I'll probably come to church more often, more consistently, more all that. And I think when we're young, we have this, whether it's professionally young or young in age, we have this idea that, giving people information, giving them the education means it's being taken from me. And in fact, it's not a seesaw. Like the education's not on one side of it. Both of those rise, at the same time. The more I educate you, the more you want education,
That's you're totally right. I couldn't have said better myself, right? And that's the piece I think a lot of people forget or feel uncomfortable about, is that they feel like, well, if I teach this guy isn't going to need me anymore, right? And you're like, it's just not true. It also goes with the whole, if you have to act like you know everything or you know how to fix everything, right? Because if, God forbid, you say, oh, I don't know this thing, right? Like, I'm going to be seen as a fraud. It's like, that's also not true. We try to instill, like in our patients and then in the clinicians when we teach them, we try to instill this mantra of, it's all detective work, right? You have to lay out the fact to your patient in advance that this is detective work. I'm going to start here. This is where the process is. Look at what we learned. We're going to then do this thing, right? It's never that I have the end all be all only answer. It's that, no, it's a process. Once you explain that to somebody, they are completely willing to go along with the process.
Yep.
If you try to not explain that to them, then the moment you're wrong about something, they question you. Right?
Yeah.
Because you told them that this was going to work this way and only this way. And then God forbid, their elbow didn't get better, right? Now you're suspect, right?
Now you're
I thought he was an expert, And so we're like, no, you don't have to do that. Explain to them the process. That goes back to teaching. It goes back to education. You're educating the patient about how to even look at problems, right? And so when we teach our patients, it's interesting. A lot of our patients have become clinicians, because they got so interested in what they were learning being a patient that they were like, oh man, like I want to go do this now for a living. And I mean like a disproportionate number of them are now doing that, because I literally teach them just like I teach a clinician. It's no different. I don't teach them like, because it should be simple for both of them. I don't overcomplicate it for clinicians. I don't overcomplicate it for patients. I try to be as direct and process oriented as possible. And that's what Sonia and I did in the clinic. And that's what we try to do with AcuMobility. Teach people how to do that. And it's shocking if you do that. It's less stressful, right? Because that's the truth. It is a process. individuals respond differently to stuff, right? You don't always know immediately what the first and only thing is going to be, right? You got your library of things that have worked in the past, but you're going to try something. And as long as they know that that's literally what the process is, and then when you get that feedback, you know the next thing to try, you can work on problems. Otherwise, oh man, now you're in all these weird dynamics that you created because your ego or fear or whatever it was set up this dialogue with them that totally misrepresented what it is that the process is. Don't do that. Just don't do that.
Yeah, I had a MMA, being out here in Vegas early on in my practice, I had a bunch of MMA clients, and one was an instructor to he taught kickboxing to a lot of early guys in the UFC. And I was asking him, like, oh, what's what have you found is the best way to win a fight? And he looked me in the eye and he said, don't get in fights. That's it. That's the best way. Because you never know what's going to happen once you get into one. Just don't get into fights. I was like,
just don't do it.
Wise words have never been spoken. So, well, Brad, I think we could go on for a couple hours here because I love your energy and I love your message. It's super exciting. Why don't we do this? First off, can you share the website where people can get some of this education, look at the products and all that?
Yes. So it is AcuMobility.com, and that's spelled ACU Mobility. No two C's, one C. ACU stands for Assess, Correct, Unify Mobility. So AcuMobility.com. And then daily, we also put out educational videos on our Instagram page, which is also AcuMobility. And YouTube AcuMobility. We are constantly trying to put out education in different formats, but through the website, you can find the products, you can find videos on how to do stuff, and then links from there.
Fantastic. Well, Brad, I certainly appreciate your time today. Definitely say hi to Sonia for me. It sounds like you guys have created such an incredible line of products based in a line of education that benefits clinicians, benefits patients, and improves performance, which hits all the markers. So congratulations and thank you for what you've contributed to our little world of movement and movement correction. It's an exciting time. And I'm glad we're not just stuck with crappy made in China lacrosse balls. Instead, find your amazing products.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for having me as a guest. This has been a lot of fun too.
It has been fun, man. This is one of my favorite interviews ever. You're just a bundle of energy and it keeps going the way I want it to go. So with that, I will say on behalf of Brad Cox from AcuMobility, this is Dr. Josh Satterlee saying, go out there, maximize your license, and live the life you dream of. Brad, thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks so much for checking out these videos. I hope they're useful. We'll cover things like rehab, exercise, business model, progressions, layout, everything else that helps you build a clinic. So if you're interested, you can click here, there, here, or anywhere to get more videos just like this. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you soon.